Hi, I'm Devin Skillian here on Local 4 Plus. We are taking you to the Detroit Economic Club where MSNBC anchor Ali Velshi is sitting down for a chat with Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. Velshi out with a new book about social justice, democracy, and making a difference. Let's take you there.
Good afternoon once again. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Steve Gregorian, President and CEO of the Detroit Economic Club. Welcome to today's exciting meeting. It is a huge birthday year for the Detroit Economic Club, 90 years of incredible speakers and networking. I do especially want to welcome our DEC members. If you're not a member, give me 10 seconds to convince you, please. Your next prospect, client, job, maybe best friend is right here in this room. If you want to build your network and learn from thought leaders on our stage, we invite you to invest in you and join today. And you can sign up at econclub.org, or we'll sweeten the pot. If you want to sign up today on your way out, we'll give you a free event ticket that you can use through the month of December. So we'd love to see you join the club. As we get started, I would just ask you to silence your cell phone so we do not disturb today's program. And of course, if you've been with us before, you know we always begin with a pledge and a prayer. So please stand and join me as we honor our country with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And kindly remain standing as our invocation today will be delivered by Major Charlotte Hall, General Secretary of the Great Lakes Division, Salvation Army.
I invite you to pray with me. I'm going to pray in my faith tradition and invite you to pray in yours. Oh, our gracious God, we know that your love is infinite and that, God, you care about all of the areas of our life. God, as we gather here today, I pray that you would just remind us that it is you who gives us our security. God, it is you who has always been there for us and will always be there for us. God, we thank you for your presence. Apart from you, we are nothing. So merciful God, we ask that you would just bless each leader in this room today, that God, you would give blessing upon blessing, that you would remind us of those who are in need, and that you would give us gracious and loving and giving hearts today. God, be with us now as we continue in this meeting. We pray through the name of Christ. Amen.
Thank you. You may all be seated. While you're doing that, a big shout out and thank you to WDIV Local 4 and Lawrence Tech University for live streaming today's meeting. If you've been with us before, you know students are here today and always, courtesy of our generous corporate sponsors. Their morning already began with a private reception with Ali. I want to let you know who's with us. We've got a group of students from Wayne State University, compliments of Herb Strather and Associates. St. Catherine of Siena High School, thank you to Rick DiBartolomeo and the Children's Foundation. Lawrence Technological University, thanks to Yasmin and Citizens Bank. And a couple of really sharp guys from Eastern Michigan University, compliments of Strather and Associates. Please join me in a round of applause to thank the students and sponsors. A couple quick things on your table. Take a look at the corporate sponsor brochure. We always want to take a moment to thank them. We would not be here if it wasn't for their generosity. So if you're one of those sponsors, thank you. If you're interested in becoming one, come see me. I will promise I will twist your arm very, very hard today. So look forward to that conversation. Also on your table, it's our seasonal lineup. And well, look at the DEC doing DEC things. Our October is jammed, and we think we've got something for everybody. This Thursday, like you haven't already heard, we're hosting Donald Trump right here at the Motor City Casino. October 15th, that's next week, we'll host the presidents of U of M, Wayne State, and Michigan State. And October 22nd, right back here, we will host Liz Cheney and Jonathan Karl. So tons more on our website, tons more to come. Get your tickets before they sell out. Here's my favorite part. It's 90 years of speakers, and those speakers tell the history of our country. Ali, you now join a distinguished list of 15 others who graced our stage on this date, October 7th, with the first in 1946. That speaker was Sanford Bates, the very first director of federal prisons. Insert your own joke here. Also on this date, two Michigan governors, Rick Snyder and John Engler, an all-time fave of Secretary Benson, Senator Carl Levin on this date. Also, the Secretary General of India, then Vice President George Bush. And when I tell you we had something for everybody, hockey fans enjoyed Mike Babcock and Ken Holland from the Red Wings. And I wasn't expecting to see this when I looked at our giant spreadsheet. Jonathan Gray, that was 1997, the author of the smash book, Men Are From Mars. So, how about that for the DEC? Today, we're pleased to add you, Ali, as our 16th speaker on this day in DEC history. Congratulations and thank you. Finally, use your smartphone. You can be involved in today's program. You can take lots of pictures, share with your social media networks. You can also submit a question for Ali using the QR code on the table in front of you. And those questions will make their way to our presiding officer, who I'm about to put to work. Carolyn Casson is President and CEO of Michigan Women Forward. She is a DEC board member, an amazing supporter of the DEC and me personally. Thank you. Carolyn does so much for so many here in our state. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Carolyn Casson.
Good afternoon. Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you, Steve. And good afternoon to all of the DEC members and their guests and my team over here. I want to say a special shout out to MWF. It's my pleasure to be able to introduce today's speakers. Ali Velshi is MSNBC's anchor and business correspondent for NBC News. Velshi has covered a wide range of breaking news events, global affairs throughout his career, including presidential elections, international refugee and debt crises, the Iran nuclear deal, and global financial crises. Such fun, right? We can't wait to hear from you. Before joining NBC News and MSNBC, Velshi worked at CNN and at Al Jazeera America in a variety of roles. Ali is an accomplished author, and his recently released book, Small Acts of Courage, A Legacy of Endurance and the Fight for Democracy, is the subject of today's meeting. Our moderator today is none other than our Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson. And she is exactly the right person to be moderating this event today. She has become one of the nation's most hardworking and prominent leaders in ensuring that elections are secure and accessible to all. A graduate of Harvard Law School and an expert on civil rights law, education law, and election law, Benson was the first woman to serve as dean at Wayne State University's law school. Just a few days ago, she delivered the closing keynote at the DEC's Young Leader Conference, and we are very proud to have her as a DEC board member. Please give a warm Detroit Economic Club welcome to Ali Velshi and Secretary Benson.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Well, I am thrilled to be here today with you, Ali. I always really appreciate getting to talk with you because you're always over-prepared, you've done your research, and you're brilliant at making connections to everything. And when it comes to, in this moment, making sure that every citizen is engaged in recognizing their power and responsibility in protecting that basic promise of foundation of who we are as Americans, our constitutional right to vote. I'm grateful for your ability to connect things that seem disconnected but really are coordinated and help viewers and the entire American public see what perhaps may not be apparent at first, but is important for us all to be educated.
And thank you. It's a real honor to be interviewed by you. This is a real turning of the tables. But you are always so willing to come on to discuss these issues, because this is not, once in a while you and I talk about Michigan-specific issues, but really you are amongst the people in this country that run an infrastructure that many of us were just not familiar with. We took for granted. We just assumed these things work until doubt was infused into our discussions around that. And you have been there to sort of remind us all, don't fall for it.
Yeah.
We actually run elections very, very well in this country, and thank you for being responsible, and your team for doing that.
Thank you. It's an honor to do that work in this moment. And it's an honor to be interviewing you now here today about this great book, Small Acts of Courage. I really enjoyed reading and really appreciated the mix of your own story and your family's story as an anchor for also helping us all think about what is in committing to small acts of courage and how that helps us thrive as a society. So with all of this going on and so many different messages you could bring out, what led you to anchor this book in this theme of family origins and journeys, and in particular sharing so much of your own family's origin and journey?
So there were three things in particular. The first one is what I called it, small acts of courage. We think of taking risks. We're in a society which sort of glorifies risk-taking, and that has made America into what it is. I wanted to reframe risk as courage, right? Mm-hmm. When you do any of these things that you do that look like risk, it takes bravery, it takes courage, and I want to sort of elevate the things that individuals can do to make their society better. The second thing I wanted to talk about was citizenship, which I have fully taken for granted. I have a lot of citizenships. which I write about in the book. I'm not sure that's entirely legal, but they're there. But I took it for granted. I thought citizenship was mostly rights, the right to vote, and some little obligations like jury duty. I've now come to understand that citizenship is our absolute responsibility to leave this place better than we found it and to nurture democracy, which I describe in the book as like a cactus. It doesn't need a lot of work, but you can't put it in a closet and ignore it and hope it's going to survive. We have to keep on improving on democracy. And I guess the third major takeaway from my book is that my family, I go back about 125 years, and it's littered with stories of people who did engage in small acts of courage and never saw the fruits of it. In particular, my grandfather, who died at the age of 58 fighting apartheid, fully convinced he had failed, fully convinced. He died in 1961, really when apartheid was at its height. It had only gotten worse. All of his efforts to fight apartheid, and the thing had only gotten worse. He had no idea that his family would escape apartheid, that they would live in democracies, that it would help foster democracy, that everybody in my immediate family, except for me, has run for office. My father became the first South Asian and Muslim elected to any parliament in Canada. My mother was a candidate, my sister was a candidate, or that I'd be here. Because in my grandfather's world, this conversation that you and I are having now would have been illegal. He had no idea what would come of the work that he did and the ground that he laid. And that's my point, that when we are fighting injustice or fighting for democracy, don't lose faith in the fact that things aren't moving at the pace you'd like it to move. You may be moving needles just by being there, just by demonstrating to your children or others around you that this is what change and progress looks like. So it's really meant to be an encouragement. It's an elevation of citizenship and an encouragement toward it.
I really appreciate you putting it that way, and I want to get to your dad's story as well and how that motivated you. But as someone who's always studied change agents, I've been and risk takers and courageous actors, I've always been moved by the fact that throughout history, so many of the people who created real change, even as significant as Dr. King or Robert Kennedy and others, they never saw the change in their lifetime, and also during their lifetime they endured great hatred in many ways, as well as criticism and not celebration. Yet today we celebrate these heroes throughout our history and celebrate and get to live in the fruits of their labor. When you're in that moment of seeking change, recognizing that that's often what we endure as change makers throughout history, how can one find and stay motivated and hopeful even when history teaches us that seeking real change means being willing to be hated, essentially, or attacked, and being willing to do the work and never see the fruits of your labor?
I mean, it's 2024. You'd think that the political violence which killed Dr. King or that killed Gandhi, you'd think that was behind us, but it's not. We're not even beyond that. So it becomes, there are lots of forces working against you being a change agent. I think two things have to happen. One is you got to have some critical thinking around you about what your true north is, what you're committed to doing, what change or success looks like for you. But for many of these people, the ultimate change that was achieved, in Gandhi's case, he had just started by trying to fight for little injustices to go away, ended up getting freedom for India from colonialism. In Dr. King's case, he was not only looking at racial injustice, but economic inequality, right? A conversation we are still having. Clearly, neither of those two things are solved in America. So I think you have to understand that whatever your large goal is, that you should have a large goal, but you may not get there. But on the way there, things will happen. On the way there, you'll meet with smaller successes, and in achieving those smaller successes, it equips you to go farther. So you are one of an example of young legislators around this country whom I talk to, because a lot of young people are discouraged. They think the system's all broken and it's all run by old people who don't change things. And that's not true. I speak to a number of dynamic young people, usually at the state level, who are, in many cases, fighting a particular injustice. So you look at the two Justins from Tennessee. They're talking about gun violence in the context of really school shootings and things like that. they'll go on to change the world, but they weren't boiling the whole ocean all at the same time. When I met Jasmine Crockett of Texas all those years ago when she was in the Texas legislature, there was a particular piece of legislation that they were fighting. It was about voting rights. Now she is a remarkable leader in the conversation around civil rights and voting rights and reproductive rights. I have so many examples of that. The point is, once you hit one piece of success, the wind is behind you to do more, and that's part of it. Think about the end goal, but think about the little things that you hit on the way that will encourage you to do that. I'm not talking about running for office. I'm talking about anything you do that makes your society better, whether it is attending your school board meetings and determining that you and your family have the right to determine what your kids read, not somebody else. Whether it's making sure you vote, making sure other people are registered to vote, and that they understand how to vote and how to register for vote. The ocean will boil when we all do our job. You don't have to do it all yourself.
And so it's hence the small acts of
Small
courage.
acts. I really wanted to emphasize small is not bad.
Yeah.
If we all just do small, if everybody made sure one other person was registered to vote, we'd all be registered to vote.
Yeah, exactly. And I love the center of voting, both when we talk on your show and elsewhere. You've always been very focused on democracy and the responsibility all of us have, not just to vote, but to lean in and make sure it's real for all. And I love in the book how the origin of that, or part of the origin of that, that commitment that you have, really stems from your father and watching your father run and hold political office when you were just 11.
Yeah. He lost when I was 11. He subsequently won later. But the losing was a bigger part of the story.
How so?
I was 11 years old, and I thought we were going to win, because what do you know when you're 11? My father was running in a constituency in Toronto against the health minister, which, as you know, in countries other than the United States, where health tends to be the biggest thing you spend on, that's one of the most prominent ministries there are, in a constituency. He was running as a liberal in a constituency that had been conservative for 42 years. In other words, there was zero chance this little immigrant man was going to win. So on election night, I was with him, and I write about this in the book, and we were getting ready to go to the campaign office. We had just finished, rush hour had died down, so we went home to just quickly shower and change. And we're driving back to the campaign office at 8 o'clock at night when the polls close. We turn on the radio, not expecting anything, and the broadcaster comes on and says, the polls are closed across Ontario. Too early to tell who will form the government tonight, except we can say that in the riding of Don Mills, Dennis Timbrell has been reelected. That was my dad's opponent. Wow. 30 seconds in.
Wow. Wow.
I mean, 100 races were run that day, and my father had the biggest loss, swiftest loss of all of them. Of course, I didn't know. I said, how did they count the votes? How could this possibly? I didn't know about projections and exit polling. And so I looked at my dad. I said, I can't believe we lost. We were just the two of us in the car together. And he looked at me and said, of course we lost. And I said, what are you talking about, we lost? What did we do this for? And he said, we did it because we could. He said, I had a chance to put my views out there, and more people voted for the other guy than voted for me. That was always going to happen. But guess what? Tomorrow, life goes on. Nobody gets arrested. Nobody gets shunned. Life goes on. He did what he could, because until then, he had lived in South Africa. He couldn't even vote because of the color of his skin. And now he ran for office. And when I think about people who are cynical about politics and politicians, and there is much reason to be in some cases, cynicism about politics is the privilege of those who have never had to live without it. And if you have to live without it for a day, you will stop being cynical about it. You will become very politically motivated.
Yeah, and another big takeaway from your book is that sort of the plight of newly naturalized citizens and their role in helping to in being inspired to protect democracy. We'll go to that, and I want to also ask you about those who are lifelong citizens born here and choose not to vote. And in 2020, of course, we had our highest turnout election here in Michigan and also across the country, and yet still nationwide, 80 million eligible citizens stayed home.
Yeah.
How does that happen? How do we get our heads around that? And how do we try to reach some of those? Because those are oftentimes also part of communities who've been disengaged, who have not seen the results of civic engagement, who've been at the losing end of even funding allocations. So how do you reach those citizens and help them see their power in moments like this?
So part of it, for instance, one of the very large constituencies of people who don't vote in this country tend to be poor and low-wage people of all backgrounds. Because they're sitting here thinking, why did I not get my end of the deal? What is this American dream? I'm not taking part in it, so I'm not participating in your process. I had Kamal Bell on the show the other day, and he said something interesting to me. He said, vote for whom you think you can bully the most. A different way of saying vote for the person you think you can have the most influence upon, because it is binary. There's going to be an election. Suggesting that because you don't like the candidates or you don't think they're of sufficient quality or they're not engaged with you so you shouldn't vote would be like saying I don't like the quality of the air so I'm not going to breathe. Your governance affects you in many, many ways. And maybe we don't do a good enough job of expressing how your governance affects you, but we're starting to learn, right? In this very room, despite the fact that your state has enshrined reproductive rights for women in its constitution, which was a remarkable thing, I still, as an American citizen, enjoy greater rights across the board than any woman in this room. That's a fact. In Michigan, I don't specifically, but I don't know how that changes in a future world. But I do. And that's not justice. If there's any space in which I have greater rights, whether or not I am naturalized, but whether I'm born here, citizens have exactly the same rights. If that's not really true, then our work is not done. And that's what we have to understand as citizens. That's our work. That's not for the government to do for you. Ours is to leave this place better than we found it in any way possible. And again, I emphasize the small because there was a wonderful woman I met in Philadelphia who was her block captain. Her job is to, make sure the block is clean and that there's always somebody who's at home, some retiree who's at home who can watch that, things are the way they're supposed to be. But she registers 100% of her block to vote, and she ensures that 100% of the voters on her block vote. One little block in Philadelphia. It can be replicated everywhere in America. And this is not an argument about who to vote for. I have views on that if anyone would like to know. But this is an argument that at first take your responsibility seriously. Not your right to vote, your responsibility to engage in civil society seriously.
And the role we all have to ensure that we're part of a society where everyone has a chance to prosper and all of that and making that real. I was really moved by also the pieces in your book and also just your other conversations about the role that new citizens in America have to play in making democracy real and healthy. How does that run up against a lot of the rhetoric we're seeing around this year's election? False allegations of non-citizens participating in our elections and sort of even broader conspiracy theories of people being busted and all of those things that you're hearing and covering and demystifying and debunking. How does that rhetoric affect both the power and agency that new citizens have in this moment to be a part of our democracy and the overall narrative of us as a welcoming country where citizenship is something to be proud of?
It really is. And first of all, despite the rhetoric, more people want to come to America than anywhere else in the world. In fact, as a Canadian, this was a challenge that Lester Pearson and Pierre Trudeau faced in 1968 when they realized people want to go to America. Or the UK. What do we do to make this country Canada, very welcoming to immigrants? And they really undertook some remarkable policy initiatives, which have been very, very, very successful in Canada. I don't think most Americans are anti-immigrant at all. I think most Americans fully understand when they walk out in the street and they see people who are very clearly immigrants that this is how our society runs. You probably understand that better in Michigan than most states. When we talked a few weeks ago on the phone, I had just come from a naturalization ceremony. I presided over a naturalization ceremony, which was amazing, given that I was naturalized 9 years ago. And I didn't take my naturalization seriously like these people have. I just took it for granted. To me, it was just easy. I was a Canadian. You can operate as a Canadian in the United States very, very easily. To me, it was a thing that I just did for no particular reason. At this naturalization ceremony, there were people discussing with these new citizens who are all registered to vote and, from my understanding, plan to vote in November to make them become election workers. They were actually sort of saying, you have the same rights as every American. You don't actually have to wait. You're now there. You want to get involved directly in keeping our elections free and fair. And I write in the book about how when my parents arrived in Canada as immigrants, this is now, my family had started in India, then they were in South Africa, then they were in Kenya, then they got to Canada. So you don't even count if you're not a double immigrant in my family. You need to at least be a triple. They got to Canada and they got involved in politics immediately. Immediately. Because they were so hungry for it, having come from South Africa, they were so hungry to participate in a political process of any sort that was legitimate, that they decided they are obliged to make it better. And I think that's a remarkable thing. You are not less of a citizen. The day you become a citizen, you are exactly the same as every citizen who was born here or has been a citizen all their lives. This nonsense about immigrants, this anti-immigrant, let's call it what it is, it's racist sentiment. It's as old as the hills. It's worked everywhere. It worked in Rwanda to create that massacre. It worked in Germany in the 30s. It's used because it works. I mean, the former president, in addition to suggesting that people are so adept that they don't speak the language, he said they don't even really know what country they're in, but somehow they're all going to be voting on November 4th. They can figure that out. Now, I come from Pennsylvania, where I live in Pennsylvania, where they make voting a little more complicated than they need to, and they're doing it again this time. But somehow the immigrants are going to get through all this stuff and they're going to vote. Illegal immigrants are going to vote in massive numbers. Ridiculous. The aid getting to Hurricane Helene is somehow being blamed on immigrants this week. I say this to immigrants, forget it. Ignore the nonsense. The noise is there. It has always been there. Your rights and your obligations are yours. You are entitled to do whatever you wish with them. We'll overcome as a society, immigrants or otherwise, that noise. And by the way, your children will be fighting it and your grandchildren will be fighting it. That's just the lot we have in life. People make there's a lot of benefits to being a racist when you want to preserve your power. It's not going to win in the end.
Like you said, I really appreciate how you said there's a lot of noise out there. We as a society can overcome that. And you as a communicator, as a journalist, as an educator of viewers all around our country, how can we help those who are best positioned to be welcoming new citizens to our country but have been fed these lies, see the benefit, the prosperity that we all collectively can enjoy as a country by welcoming others in, as opposed to becoming, hateful or exclusionary at best?
You see, it's tricky because it kind of has to be in your DNA. You've got to have seen it. And as a guy who grew up in Canada in the 1970s, in a room like this, you'll all know exactly what I'm talking about. There are many. I grew up in Toronto, where if you were in Toronto, as I was when we arrived in 1970, it wasn't obvious that Toronto of 1970 was going to become Toronto of today. It was a provincial, slow-moving town in which the streets closed up at 6 o'clock at night, and you definitely weren't doing anything on Sunday except going to church. There was no shopping, no eating out, no particular recreation. And everybody my age who saw that recognizes that in addition to other things that happened to the place, this happened to it. Immigration happened to it. Immigration gave it the workforce to be able to punch above its weight. So again, we see this differently in Canada. It's not that there are not pockets in Canada where anti-immigration sentiment is also setting in, as it is all over the world. But in America, I think we need to tell a different story, and that is the story of the economic imperative. Our economic growth, which leads the world at the moment, not inflation, in fact. Inflation is well under wages. Inflation, as you heard earlier, we're running at about 2.5%. Annualized wage growth is running at 4%. That's fine. That's actually all right. There are specific things we have to fix about it, but we're doing very, very well. The Congressional Budget Office has shown that if you take immigration out of the mix, essentially, we'll crash. We will simply collapse. Our workforce, we continue to have a negative birth rate in this country. That's the way it is for all modern democracies. Hungary, which has real reasons to, let me rephrase this. Hungary really doesn't like immigrants. And it's not just racist. It's that the Hungarian language is not spoken by anybody around them. So they are very, very concerned about their language. The analog would be Quebec, right, where they're worried that if people come in, don't speak our language, we'll lose our language, we'll lose our culture, and the whole thing will collapse. So Hungary has encouraged people to have lots of children by saying that if you have 5 children, you will never pay income tax again.
Wow.
Right, pretty impressive, right? Nobody took the deal. Nobody wants 5 children. So
a lot of expenses that come with that, so it's like the tax breaks. I don't know if it was
but it's fundamentally just interesting. It's not really going to work. So you're going to have to find other ways to deal with this thing, and the other ways are making sure that you are remarkably welcoming to immigrants. I would agree. Have laws that you need. Make sure you can control your borders. That's all important stuff. But understand what it is you want and be able to get it. Because if you work in technology in America, or you work in healthcare, or you work for a hospital, you understand that you are desperate for immigrants right now. And that's the message we have to get out to people. Don't be mean to these people. Don't be mean to them. You need them very badly.
Yeah. How can we get messages like that out in this sort of 24/7 news cycle where the campaigns seem to dominate over governance? Certainly in a moment like this, it's campaigns all the time. But even after this, come February and March, how do we ever, and how do you communicate to the public that we need to look at governance and the role that leaders have in governing as opposed to just campaigning all the time? Because it's the campaigning that leads to these divisions
That's
and
exactly
the rhetoric.
Right. And that's why groups like this are really important, because the conversations that we actually have to have about our polity and our economy are really important ones, like trade, for instance. Like, this is really an important conversation. Like EVs. Really, really important to understand the role that they should play in our economy. Like immigration, like what healthcare should look like, what should minimum wage be, like unionization, like collective bargaining. These are like the electrical grid. These are really important conversations, including what you do, by the way. How do we administer elections? These are all conversations we should be having all the time, but our politics has so departed from that. Again, not just in the United States, it's happening in other places, including in Europe, where people are becoming single-issue voters, generally about some xenophobic trend, and they're not having debates. So debates between candidates are not real debates about how would you approach those several things that I just mentioned, or other things, including climate, that are important to you, or reproductive rights. It's all one side or the other. So for the moment, we're not having this conversation for the next 29 days. I would hope people are sensible enough to understand that what you thought of was anti-immigration is in fact racism, and that it's just racism. It's not more sophisticated than that. No one is capturing or eating your cats and dogs. You know, this is all nonsense. I'm hoping that. I believe that we are not a deeply racist society. I believe that people manipulate those who are not doing as well in society and cause them to have someone to blame. But that is age-old history. It's always happened. I'm just hoping we see through it.
You know, it's interesting is reflecting on both the history of our nation and the divisiveness of racism and racial injustice, and yet the thing that has helped us grow as a country and as a democracy, I've always been moved by the fact that it wasn't LBJ who just all of a sudden said we need to pass a Voting Rights Act. It was hundreds of citizens standing up and saying we're not going to take the bus anymore unless you integrate. We're not going to, we're going to march from Selma to Montgomery even if you threaten us with violence. Do you still see that spirit today, and how do we? I mean, I'll just editorialize for a minute and say one of the things that's inspired me about our democracy in Michigan is that it wasn't lawmakers that expanded our rights in this state, reproductive freedom or voting rights. It was citizens.
That's right.
Seeing their power to push a ballot initiative forward and having that amend our Constitution and then voting it into a law. How do you think, especially with all of this division in this moment, as well as the rise of social media and the challenges there, can we still see a sort of citizenry empowered by small acts of courage?
Yes, I think we can.
And how does that come about?
Yeah, I think, first of all, there have been real victories. You talked about them in Michigan, but reproductive rights, every state that has had a referendum or a statewide ballot has resulted in people coming out and saying, don't take my rights away. It's not actually a commentary on abortion. It's a commentary on rights. Don't take my rights away. I think there are 10 more of these in this coming election. So you're seeing people who are claiming their agency. I think we have to encourage people, or we have to remind people, you have agency. One person, in many cases, has motivated change around the world. If that one person might have been Rosa Parks, right? People motivate change. And so don't get away from the concept of motivating change, and don't get away from my father's idea that I present my idea and someone can vote for me or someone can vote for the other person, but at least you have a right to run. How many municipal offices, school board offices in this country, and legislative seats go through elections uncontested? There are acclamations in this country. There should be 0 acclamations in the United States in 2024. Every office should be contested. Every office should be debated. Every person who's running for elected office should be able to stand on their record. But we are still acclaiming people in this country. We got gerrymandering. I get it. There are lots of things working against your best interests as a democratic participant, but we still have agency. What they are fighting for in Ukraine is to preserve their agency. They are taking up arms and fighting with their lives to say, we want our right to make our decisions with our ballot. We have that in America. don't squander it. Vote for whomever you want. Spoil your ballot if you have to. But be part of the process and then do what Kamau Bell did. Find the person who you can bully the most into adopting your views.
Yeah, so my last question, and we're going to, I think, open it up to audience questions, is that very one, though. As someone who, again, we've been hosting mock elections around the state. 1 million eligible 18 to 29-year-olds in our state didn't vote in 2020. We're trying to get them, though many of them are registered to vote in this year's election, as well as many others who are non-voters but eligible. We want them to participate. But so many people have been infected by the noise,
Yes. Yeah.
who have done exactly what the noise and the chaos and the confusion,
Want them to do.
right, checked out,
Yeah.
and don't even care about the conversation of whether
Right.
or not they have agency. How do we reach them? That's the million-dollar
Yeah.
question, right? How do we get people to see their agency who have been checked
Yeah.
out and discouraged?
So I think some of it is going to be done by that woman I talked about in Philadelphia, right? It's going to be empowering people who have any say or influence in their communities to have that conversation almost one-on-one. You need to convince people. You have to look at them in the eyes and say, I hear you. I hear all of what you're saying, all your beefs about this, but it starts with your participation, right? At least vote. This is going to be such a consequential election. In 25 years, when your children or grandchildren ask you what you did in 2024, you don't want to say nothing, right? At least I voted. And that's a big deal, but it's the price of admission. And if you're upset because you're not being heard or you're feeling left out of the process, that's valid. You have ways of being involved in the process. Some of those are protest. I write about protest. I'm a child of protest. I was arrested at a protest. Some of it is protest. Some of it is civic participation at very local levels. And some of it is getting out there and supporting candidates. We are finding right now in this particular election, more and more people are saying, what else can I do? I'm going to vote. I'm going to vote early. What else can I do? And I think people are ripe for the idea that there is more you can do, but you are a whole citizen. Everything you do in the improvement of your community, including places like this is civic engagement. Engage as frequently and as often and as deeply as you can, and make sure you're talking to those people next to you about what they're doing. Your neighbors, the way we used to do when I was growing up. You had debates about why your neighbor had that particular sign versus somebody else's sign. But at least you're in it. But for young people, I will say that the proof is in the pudding with these young people who I interview on a regular basis who are elected officials. They can do it. They can change the world. They can probably do a better job of it than my generation has. They have views of what an idealistic society looks like. You live in a world where you can actually make that happen. Don't let anybody convince you you can't or you shouldn't make it happen.
Well done. Well said. And thank you. I think anyone seeking to be a change agent or recognizing that it's not about, what chance do you have to succeed, but really what choice
Correct.
you have
That's right.
in a democracy to engage. I think, Ali, your book really underscores that responsibility we all have and that hope that in doing so, we can actually, in committing small acts of courage, we can create this world that we all aspire of common humanity and economic prosperity as well. So thank you for writing this book and telling so many stories as well throughout your family's history and others in it. It's very inspiring. And now I'm going to hand it over to Carolyn Casson with some audience questions as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Great job. There's so many questions here that they want you to speak about another hour and a half. And I'm going to try to summarize some of them. They don't think they quite got enough of Ali Velshi, the economist. So they feel like you've shortchanged us here.
Fair enough.
So here's a couple of economic issues they'd like to hear you talk about. Tariffs. Good, bad?
Yeah. Oh, well, no,
Right?
I'll answer the question more fully than a grunt.
Okay, and also about, here in the Motor City, we care about EV politics.
Yeah.
And so they want to hear your take on the policies that
Fantastic.
have already been enacted.
Thank you. Okay, that's great. Somebody said to me, what are you doing in Detroit? And I told them where I'm going, and they said, that's random. I said, no, it's not random. This is actually what I do. I'm an economics journalist. This is what I came up doing. So I love nothing better than to talk about it. And given the fact that I'm Canadian, one of the reasons why Michigan and Ontario are so close is because we all grew up understanding trade with one another. This is an example where trade is not only a good thing, but it nurtures the types of relationships that solidify bonds between people. although it was very different. We didn't have nearly the extent of free trade when I was growing up. So Canadians came to America because you could buy things that you couldn't get back home, or some things cheaper. I think two things. One is the conversation about tariffs, and we had a bit of a conversation about this a little earlier with a group of students. It's a really complex thing. Tariffs can be used as a weapon. They can be used as an encouragement for certain behavior. You can reduce tariffs with a country that you want to trade with, but their trade policies are not, or maybe their worker policies or their human rights policies are not as good. But they are a very sophisticated tool, and they should be applied with sophistication. And we're having a weird conversation about it in the election that is entirely unsophisticated, about across-the-board tariffs of 10 or 20% with everybody, and then 50 or 60% with China. We have to really, really think this through. What is it we want? What do we want to achieve? Across-the-board tariffs are just, it's just a crazy way of doing things. You want to have trade relationships with countries. Some of them, for instance, when we were in the Iran deal for a short amount of time, we actually saw success with that. Fundamentally, it was a treaty, but it was kind of a trade relationship. We're going to allow you to buy and sell your goods, which is what most of the Iranian people wanted to do. They were not concerned with this larger fight that's going on, and now we're so steeped in it that we're all on edge that there's a war going to break out. So sometimes tariffs encourage that. With China, it's been very complicated. The electric vehicle conversation also, as it relates to China, is really complicated because we probably haven't had the discussion that we should be having as a country about where we'd like to be. Why are electric vehicles important to our future, and what do we need to do to make that happen? It's not really fair to just put this on automakers and say, you guys make lots of electric vehicles and it'll all work itself out. That's not how this works. We've gone from a combustible engine gas economy, which we're still in. We may be going to an electrified economy if all things go well, but that requires some sophisticated government policy and thinking and incentives. And we're kind of half pregnant on this one. So I think it really deserves a real conversation where people can put forward the pros and cons of electrification.
Well, no, I want to follow up. Where's the space for that conversation in the data?
Right. In the moment, there's none.
Yeah.
This will, unfortunately, it comes up in the election, so people may vote on the basis of it. I don't really think that's happening in this particular election on the basis of EV policy. Yeah. But after the election, we should really be having it. It's a very, very important thing, and if we do not be careful, China will simply control the world of electric vehicles, and we will be third bit players on this thing. So we have to think about this very carefully.
They want to hear you talk about the capital markets because that's what you talk about more than anything else. They want to know what you think a Harris-Walz economy is going to look like versus a Trump-Vance economy.
Right. Look, the economy is empirically strong. In fact, our problem with inflation is that the economy was too strong. People are spending money, and we have a strong stock market. We've got unemployment at 4%. We just created more jobs in September than anybody expected we would, 100,000 more jobs. We've got a strong economy. That's not our problem. It is going to be fed by immigration. We're going to have to deal with that. Look, I looked this morning and saw that 10-year yields were up again, which means you're not refinancing your mortgage anytime all that soon. That's a bit of a problem. Mortgage rates are high. But there's a great deal of confidence in this economy. Every few months, in need of news coverage, some economist or bank chairman gets up and warns of that recession that we've been warning about for 4 years. Let me tell you, we're going to have recessions. We have recessions, and we're actually uniquely good at getting out of recessions. We know how to do it, but the Federal Reserve has to be able to lower interest rates when we have it. So they don't want to go to zero interest rates. But we've got a lot of space to go. I think the Fed will cut rates again in a month. I think there's no meaningful option at the moment for most serious investors other than public markets. Obviously, there's some people who have opportunities to invest in a different way, but for most people, the stock market looks like it makes a lot of sense at the moment. Yields will come down. Rates will come down. Mortgage rates will come down. We've already seen upticks in the housing market. We have to solve for that problem. Part of the problem is that Harris-Walz have promised a starter amount of money for first-time home buyers, which is great because homes are entirely unaffordable to most people. I mean, that's a real crisis. Most people can't afford the average home in America. That said, they've also promised to build 3 million housing units, and those two things have to work in concert because you can't take the market we've got, throw all this extra money into it, and hope it's all going to work out. But I think they understand that, that if they get elected, they're going to have to do both of those things. I would comment on Donald Trump's policies on this, except he doesn't really have any on them. So he has a view that interest rates are too high. So do I. That and $5 a cup of coffee. But you can ask him that yourself, yeah. Except the last time he was, just take a note, the last time he was at an economic club and was asked a very specific policy question, he answered with China and tariffs. So if you're here, ask him to actually answer the question.
Oh, I have to summarize 26 more questions, so let's move on. You've said that the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice is not the way you see it. You say that the arc of history bends towards the way you bend it.
Yes, correct. And I think that's something people have to understand. People, I think, misrepresent Dr. King because he understood this better than anyone. If he thought the arc of history bent towards justice, he would have sat at home and thought justice was going to solve this whole thing. He didn't. He was out there all the time trying to get people to be out in the streets and protest and vote, and he was negotiating with the president to say, we need to bend this thing the way we need to bend it. And I think this is really, really important for people to understand in this moment in America. The arc of history will bend the way you bend it. And you've got an opportunity on November 5th to bend it. But it's not just November 5th. It's all the time. Do not assume this will fix itself. It is not on simply the Jocelyn Bensons of the world to make sure that all that you can set up the infrastructure for people to believe that their vote counts and to make sure their vote is counted, right? That is your fundamental responsibility. And that first part, believing your vote counts. But you have to do the rest of it. You have to say, how am I bending the arc of history? And by the way, it's everything. For my friends from the Salvation Army, you're bending the arc of history by making sure people who have needs have those needs met. It doesn't all have to feel like partisan politics. For some people, that's a distasteful place to be. Fine. You don't want partisan politics. You don't have to do it. You can fix history and injustice at every street corner.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I could summarize in my 3 minutes. So now we have lightning round questions, right? We love to do this. We love to ask you something that you really don't want to answer. And so here we go. Something that is not on your bucket list, your anti-bucket list, we call it, something you've done before, but you never want to do again.
Me?
Jocelyn?
I ran a marathon, the Boston Marathon, 8 months pregnant. Don't need to do that again.
Please don't do that again, Jocelyn.
I'm also definitely not running a marathon 8 months pregnant. I got, for covering the protests, the George Floyd protests, I got shot with a rubber bullet by police.
Oh, wow.
I'm not doing that one again.
Oh.
Wow. You have to come back. There's so much to say. Your best sport growing up, what sport did you either do or love to watch?
I'm a baseball fan, as Barb McQuaid knows, and I always wanted to be an umpire.
Wow.
But I felt that I couldn't because I never saw a woman as an umpire, and so now here I am as the referee of our elections.
So you are an umpire.
Yeah,
that's right.
But, yeah.
I grew up in Canada, so there's only one right answer to this. Hockey, although I could never, I was a terrible skater, and I didn't realize this until well into my adulthood when I finally went to a chiropodist who looked at my feet for an unrelated matter and said, I guess you don't skate. And I said, well, I try to. I'm not very good. He said, no, your knees and your feet don't point the same direction. You'll never be.
Oh, wow.
So I grew up thinking I was just a bad skater, which is a bit of a problem in Canada. And so soccer is what I changed to.
Ah.
Oh, you changed it the last second there. All right. What was your very first paying job?
I worked at like a thing that doesn't exist anymore. I worked at a store that rented videos, movies.
Oh, I worked at Blockbuster too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, Blockbuster Video, and before that I worked in movie theater selling popcorn.
They're still alive. They're still
they are,
sort of around. But
yeah.
Good.
Thanks to the concession stand. Which is
yeah, that's exactly right. That's why I go.
I bet you were good. You gave extra popcorn. I know you did.
Did I tell the story when I told this the other day when Jean-Claude Van Damme came in to see his movie in the theater, and his person asked for a free popcorn, and I said no. They came up and they said, do you know who this is? And I said, yeah, and he also still can't get free popcorn. So
that's why she runs elections so well.
A karaoke song that each of you can nail. If we start the music,
I don't know if I can.
Karaoke.
Do I have to answer this first?
I'll go.
Okay.
Sweet Caroline.
Oh, that was mine.
Good. Bum, bum, bum. Okay, good.
I've changed mine. I said the Moana song the other day. But I actually think it's a song from The Greatest Showman called This Is Me.
Oh.
I don't know if you all know it. My son's a theater kid, and I once saw a bunch of 7-year-olds belting out this song to their parents at a theater performance, and it still gets me every time.
Oh, wow.
The strength and the courage and the small, that song's about standing up for who you are, no matter what anyone else.
That's great. Great song. All right, last question, advice to your 25-year-old self.
I would say believe in yourself and don't give up.
And I'd say you know half as much as you think you're going to know when you're 50, so relax.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you
both.
Thank
This
you,
is
Ally.
wonderful.
All right, my job to close it out. A couple of thank yous, Allie. Fascinating conversation, and we do want to have you come back. Carolyn's going to put the pressure on you to come back sometime
Next
soon.
year.
So
Absolutely my honor.
good, thank you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I
You've
know.
got enough
You
questions
come
for
up
next year.
here.
Yeah.
We'll do that.
So good luck with the book. We'll talk about that in a second. Jocelyn, you are so darn busy. We really, really appreciate
Anytime you need me, Steve.
all of your time. You did a terrific job. And Carolyn, you always do a fantastic job for us, so thank you. All right, so don't go anywhere. We've got the book, Small Acts of Courage, and we are going to give away 3 of these books. So get your tickets out. I'll remind you, if you're not one of these winners, there'll be a book sale, and Ollie will sign those for us right after we conclude here. So got your tickets out. I'm going to put the pressure on Josh.
Oh, good. This is what I do for a living. No, I'm kidding. I was kidding. Sure. Okay. Whoop. Are you ready? All right. 298607. I guess I could have just done that.
Must be present.
Nice.
And Melanie,
There we go.
Teresa's got your book right here. All right.
I'll do the next one. Thank you. All right, 298609. Same table, probably, right? So no, 609. All right, 298668. Okay.
Oh, there we go. Over there.
There we go. 668. All right. And this one's 298576. 576, there you go. All right.
All right, for those of you that did not win, there'll be a book sale and signing. So, ladies and gentlemen, tell your friends and colleagues to join the DEC. You won't find a better group of people. And, 1:30, on time, every time. This meeting of the Detroit Economic Club is now adjourned. Thank you.
That's good.